Welcome to episode 300 of App Stories. This episode is brought to you by Things, Collide, Pillow, and Cosmic. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John, and happy episode 300.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Congratulations to you, too. This has been a long haul. 300 is a lot, Federico. I mean, I love it. I mean, I don't feel like it's been 300, and I look forward to chatting with you about apps every single week. But boy, it's 300's a lot.
Yeah, and we were just discussing on the pre-show that it doesn't feel like it. We're obviously so lucky to have all of our listeners, regardless of whether you listen to the free and regular version of App Stories, or if you jumped on board with App Stories Plus last year or a few months ago or today. It's always a great time to have an extended ad-free version of App Stories that comes out sooner than the regular show. But we are so thankful to have all of you. And I think we are so lucky to be able to produce a show that's fun for us to do. And it keeps us on our toes, because as we were talking a few minutes ago on App Stories Plus, there's always new apps coming out, and we gotta stay up to date about the latest trends, about the latest apps, and there's a never-ending supply of software for us to talk about.
Sure.
So it's it's fun, and I'm so happy that 5 years ago we had this idea for App Stories, and on to the next 100 episodes, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, definitely. Thanks to all of the listeners, sponsors, and subscribers. I mean, it's been a fun 5 years plus now. We started in 2017. I still remember sitting in O'Hare Airport and finalizing some things with you as I was flying off to Ireland with my son who was going to college, which was a little bit bananas to be launching a show in the midst of all of that. But it's really been a lot of fun these last 5+ years. Why don't we dive right into the topics, Federico? And I thought what we would do for episode 300 is turn back the clock and look at two episodes okay. 100 and 200. Now, episode 100 was all about app trends, and it was published back in 2019.
Ooh, okay, 3 years ago. So this is pre-pandemic.
It is. And so it was funny listening back, because you and I were talking about things like folding phones, folding mobile phones, which had just been
cute.
Right. It had just been introduced the first time that year at CES. We were talking about Mac Catalyst, but back then it was still a rumor, and it was still called Marzipan.
Oh man, Marzipan.
Yep. And iTunes had just come to Samsung TVs at CES, which was
change. iTunes.
Yeah, it was iTunes. It was a big deal. Now you can get Apple TV Plus at the TV app on basically any smart TV, I think.
Very nice. Yeah, and now of course, so many of these things. Just taking a look at this stuff now, right? Apple services on TVs and other platforms are pretty much the norm. Like I have a new LG TV that's got a bunch of Apple apps on it. It's got Apple TV, it's got AirPlay. It serves as a HomeKit device. Obviously, Apple just announced a few days ago that they have teamed up with Microsoft to bring Apple Music, Apple TV, and iCloud Photos to Windows. That kind of stuff is now the norm, because Apple has fully evolved into a services company, and therefore their services need to be everywhere. Catalyst, I mean, very much still a thing that's here with us today, and that we still talk about. And folding phones, Apple has still not made one, but obviously everybody's looking at Samsung and the progress they're making on an annual basis with the Z Fold and the Z Flip. Version 4, I believe, came out last month or 2 months ago in August, and they're making great progress, especially compared to the first version from 3 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. They absolutely have. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Things by Cultured Code, the award-winning to-do app. If you want to achieve a goal, you've got to have a plan. And when it comes to making plans, there's no better tool than the award-winning app, Things. The idea behind Things is super simple. You create a project for each of your goals, and then you just add the steps to reach each of those goals, and then choose which days you'll work on each of them. Every morning when you wake up, Things has already prepared your to-dos for the day. Just spend a few minutes reviewing the list, put your to-dos in the order you plan to work on them, and then get on with your day. It doesn't matter which device you're on. Your to-dos are always in sync on your computer, in your pocket, and on your wrist. One of the features that you'll really love are the new lock screen widgets for iPhone. With the widgets, you can view a to-do list right on your lock screen, quickly add a new to-do with just a tap, or see a progress ring that inches towards completion as you tick off your to-dos. There are other great features too. Connect your calendars to see your events, schedule repeating tasks, write notes in Markdown, and a whole lot more. But when it comes to things, what you'll love the most is the app's design. Every detail is thoughtfully considered and polished to perfection. It's also a completely native app and a 2-time winner of the Apple Design Award. So if you haven't tried Things, you should check out the latest version. Head on over to the website, thingsapp.com. Again, that's thingsapp.com. Learn more all about the great features and download a free trial for the Mac. Of course, you'll also find it on the App Store. Just search for Things. Whatever it is you want to accomplish in life, Things can help you get there. Try Things today at thingsapp.com. You won't regret it. Our thanks to Things by Cultured Code for their support of the show. Let's dig into those app trends because I kind of created a list of things that we talked about. And the first one right off the bat was rich notifications. And at the time, our two examples that we called out were JSON by Simon Stovrain and Lookup from Vidit Bhargava, because both of those developers were very early on in the rich notification trend where, you would, for instance, with Lookup, you could get a word of the day and it would have if I remember right, it would have a thumbnail for the artwork for that particular word and things like that. That was a very new thing because before that, notifications were a pretty static affair.
Yes, and I believe our conversation at the time was, if Apple is betting on AR in the future for a new device, we were already talking about a headset. ARKit was already with us 3 years ago. And we were talking about rich notifications in the context of in a future where you have this kind of new sort of environmental computing, like that's always around you. If you're wearing a headset and you're taking a look around you, it makes sense to have these rich notifications that can tell you things and show you more things at a glance. Now, fast forward 3 years later, and this is kind of perfect because literally last month we got the iPhone 14 Pro with the dynamic island and iOS 16 with live activities that are the natural evolution of these. They are the ultimate expression of this idea so far, meaning that you have these real-time, really, really rich notifications that have animations, that have, in some cases, interactivity in them, that you can glance at on your lock screen and in this brand new component of the iPhone. And I continue to believe this will only continue as, again, from here on out. This is not the last time we'll be talking about rich notifications, and keeping an eye on these small, compact interfaces in real time as things happen on your device and around you. This, I believe, Apple's focus on rich notifications, live activities, compact interfaces is laying the foundation for the kind of design that their headset will have in the future and the kind of software that it will run.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it also ties into maybe a larger picture trend that we talked a little bit on that episode too, which is apps as atomic units. We've really seen the app split up into all different parts of the OS. You've got widgets, you've got shortcuts integrations, whether they're app shortcuts or shortcut actions. You've got this dynamic island now where you can actually go right into the widget from that, or you can go into the app. It's really, notifications ties into that. So many things now do. The lock screen, it's a really long list. It's a lot for developers to do, but I think it also gives developers an opportunity to be more relevant and to be in more places on your phone than ever before.
Yeah, I agree. The other trend we talked about, subscriptions. We said that app subscriptions will continue expanding and that they would become the norm, and they very much have.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's the app subscriptions. Many people still don't like them. We talked about how developers can mix and match different payment models, right? Some developers are mixing subscriptions with lifetime unlocks, with some of them are still trying in-app purchases. So yeah, I think it's only fair to say that app subscriptions have become the most common payment model, especially when it comes to productivity software, to anything that involves getting work done or collaborating with the team. We're seeing on the App Store, I think, we have seen a rise of cheaper subscriptions, even for utilities, like paying a subscription for a weather app. It's also pretty much the norm at this point. Because again, those weather APIs, they have recurring costs, and now even if you try the Apple Weather Kit service, that still has a cost that as a developer you gotta face, and therefore paying a subscription for a small and simple weather app, that's also the norm. I think, again, this will only continue. This is the future. This is our present, and it'll also be our future going forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think when we started this show, subscriptions were brand new at the time, and there was a lot of controversy about them. A lot of people were very upset with the idea of paying a subscription for their apps. And to a degree, that hasn't changed. I mean, we still see an awful lot of upset users when subscriptions are rolled out. But part of that is still that there's a large number of really good apps that people have relied on for years that are still making that transition. And I think it has probably, people have become more accustomed to it. And I think people also have started to realize that just because a subscription isn't for them, because it's maybe more than they want to pay, doesn't mean it's a bad way to for the developers to have a business model. And there are so many other alternatives out there now too that you can always switch. So I think subscriptions are here to stay. I think they're only going to grow. I think one other thing that we talked about in that episode, which I thought was kind of funny, is we talked about the notion of subscribing to Apple, which has very much happened with the Apple One plan bundle, where you get all the different services as one thing. And now we're actually, seeing rumors of perhaps Apple is going to start having hardware subscriptions too, which is an interesting turn of events.
Yeah. And obviously I'm still not using Apple One, but that's the thing with subscriptions. You have options, right?
Yeah.
And so I think third-party developers will also continue down this road of offering options, but by default, I think subscriptions will always remain the simplest way to get started with something, whether it's a simple utility or a productivity software, whatever it is.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can help your health and well-being in more ways than one. Pillow is a simple app that helps you become more aware of your sleep patterns and to make informed decisions to improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch to bed. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. You can use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad too, with the press of a button before going to bed. If, however, you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trend, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for every session. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and noises that might be disturbing your sleep. Also, if you have an Apple Watch Series 6 or newer, Pillow will display information about the intensity of those sounds and give you a rating of each one. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions and improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, and easily compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before going to bed, Pillow has an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. There's even a power nap mode if you have a chance to take a nap during the day, which can boost your focus, creativity, and overall well-being too. Pillow can also wake you up to the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. And starting with watchOS 6, it uses minimal battery too. Last but not least, Pillow is privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't have to register or sign up for an account to use Pillow. You can use it totally anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a great set of features that you can use every day for free. But if you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
Another trend that we mentioned, Apple content and Apple services on third-party hardware. We just spoke about this a few minutes ago. 3 years ago, iTunes on Samsung TVs. I remember when the news came out, it was a big deal. Now it's totally expected. Like now everybody's making apps for something else, right? And I mean, in a world where Sony is turning PlayStation games into PC games that you can run on the Steam Deck, it shouldn't surprise you that you can use Apple TV, the web service on Windows, or Apple TV on Roku, or Apple Music on an Xbox. This is just this is how our society has changed. Entertainment is everywhere, regardless of the box or the computer or the console that you buy. So that's just what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, back in the day when Apple Music went to Android, that was a big deal. It was it seemed really unusual. And when Samsung TVs got iTunes, those were the days when there was still litigation going on between Apple and Samsung, I believe, over intellectual property. So that also seemed kind of radical at the time. But yeah, now, you've got all these things coming to Windows computers next year, Xbox, PlayStation, all sorts of different platforms.
Yeah. 3 years ago, we were also talking about keyboard control in iPad apps.
Yes, we were.
That was new at the time. We could tell, like, for context, I think this is important because you may be like, wait, what? Keyboard control? That's obvious.
Yeah.
This is 2019. 2019, it's before the Magic Keyboard that came out in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. But the native pointer and the Magic Keyboard did not exist when we recorded that episode. Nope. So this is important context. All we had was the old school keyboard cheat sheet when you press down on the command key on a third-party keyboard, you will get the translucent overlay in iPadOS. And then we had some examples of third-party apps that were going a little beyond that in terms of adopting the keyboard in their iPad experiences. And one of them was Things. We talked about Things version 3.6 by Culture Code that did some excellent work in adopting keyboard shortcuts on iPadOS. Agenda was also another of the apps that we mentioned. Now, this story has completely changed, right? In 2020, Apple released iPadOS 13.4. with native pointer support, and they released their own Magic Keyboard with a built-in native trackpad. Now, that Magic Keyboard is very much due for an update and redesign. I really hope that if Apple is working on new iPad Pros, that there's also a new accessory story to go along with it this year, because I kind of want to see Apple try something new with the Magic Keyboard. But still, of course, in iPadOS 15, was it 15 or 14? When did Apple redesign the keyboard shortcut menu? Was it 14 or 15?
I think it was 15.
Yeah, I think it was 15. Anyway, now when you press down on the command key, you get what is effectively looks like a menu bar from macOS, but it comes up from the bottom of the screen, and you have your menus, all your keyboard shortcuts organized in menus and sub-menus. It's very nicely done, and I think it has become the norm if you have an iPadOS app to have rich keyboard integration that consists of different keyboard commands, but also support for the native pointer, whether you're using the Magic Keyboard or a third-party mouse or trackpad, as well as pointer effects and all the different pointer styles.
Yeah, I agree. Federico, before we talk a little bit about what things we see coming down the road from the perspective of 2022, I have one last topic, which is app convergence. Now, as I said at the outset, this was back in the days of Marzipan. And it was 2019. It was February 2019 when this episode came out. We had seen the sneak peek the summer before at WWDC, which showed off the 5 system apps, I think it is, that were built with Marzipan. And people were unhappy. Those apps were a little rough. It was not a great kickoff to Mac Catalyst. But you and I had been thinking about this a lot, and it was something that we could see very clearly coming down the road, I think, where the idea was that there has to be an easier and better way for apps to come from the iPad and make their way to the Mac App Store. The Mac App Store was a very sleepy place in 2019, and to some degree it still is, but it's gotten a lot better. And a lot of the improvement has come from iPad apps coming over to the Mac. I'll tell you that of the betas I see on the Mac, these days, the vast majority of them are Mac Catalyst apps or apps that in some way have been built for both the iPad and the Mac at the same time. And I think that was not entirely clear that was where Apple was going to go in early 2019, but I think it really has proven out to be true that the idea is to have a more unified experience between the Mac and the iPad in a way that makes it not only easier for users, but also makes it a better economic deal for developers to be developing for both instead of one or the other.
Yeah, I think this is obviously a long conversation that started 4 years ago. We talked about it 3 years ago. We're still talking about it today.
Right.
And
it's still in process, yes.
It's still in process, and I think it's one of the things that we will discuss in a few minutes in the what's coming next section. But I think you're right. I think there should maybe be more incentives for developers to have this kind of unified experience. I still can shake the feeling, though, that this conversation that we're having is only a temporary conversation, despite what Apple is saying in terms of keeping the iPad and Mac separate as physical devices. I can shake this feeling that I don't know if this will still be the same story 3 years from now. You look at things like all this work that is going into making sure to have a consistent experience across macOS and iPadOS, between Ventura and iPadOS 16, right? All these macOS features that were missing on iPadOS, they're bringing them over to iPadOS. There's a new multitasking system. Set aside the issues and bugs of Stage Manager, but they're launching the same multitasking system on the same 2 platforms. Like, I think there's definitely something here that we're not seeing just yet. And I know that Apple has been banging this drum for years now of, no, we're keeping the Mac and iPad separate, but it sure seems like from a software perspective, they are, on a trajectory that is possibly leading them to a collision at some point.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, we're definitely on if it's not a convergence, it's at least a very close continuum from one set of hardware and software to the other. So, well, I guess what remains to be seen. I think we'll get around to talking about Stage Manager some more at some point, but I think Stage Manager is maybe a speed bump in this road to convergence at the moment, but we'll see. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Collide. Traditional endpoint security tools can make the workplace feel like a surveillance state, turn users and IT teams into adversaries, and ultimately drive your employees to work on unsecured personal devices. It doesn't have to be that way. Collide is a device security solution built around honest security. Their philosophy is employees aren't your biggest security risk, they're your biggest allies, and your relationship with them should be based on transparency and informed consent. Collide works by notifying your employees of security issues via Slack and giving them step-by-step instructions on how to resolve those issues. For IT and security teams, Collide provides the right level of visibility for Mac, Windows, and Linux devices, and it can answer questions about your fleet's security that traditional MDMs can't. You can meet your security goals without compromising your values. Visit collide.com/appstories today to find out how. And if you follow that link, they'll hook you up with a goodie bag just for activating a free trial. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show. All right, Federico, what do you say we talk about what we're going to see next?
Okay.
I think we need to kick it off with something that you and I think are both enamored of, which is command-based systems for apps, text-based. Things like Obsidian, Craft, and even Spark now, where you can hit a keyboard shortcut and type a command to perform some kind of action in an app. It is a lot like Spotlight, but narrowed down to the context of a particular app. And I could see even at some point Apple making this part of Spotlight, because I think one of the problems with Spotlight is that when you do it, it tries to be everything all at once. It's giving you web results, right? Web results and documents and recent searches and all kinds of things. And I think if you could use Spotlight and specify that you want to use it within the context of mail or notes or reminders or whatever, that would be really good, because not only would you be able to find results of the content that are in each of those apps, but you would be able to, in my perfect world, actually do things like create a reminder or start an email message, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that started from third-party developers that sort of took off in this niche of Silicon Valley startups. I think apps like Superhuman, apps like which is an email client. What's the other calendar app? Cron? I think maybe Cron.
Yes.
We've seen this, they call them command bars, or usually it's called a command bar. Now Todoist has it. Readwise, Reader, still in beta, has it.
Raycast is a very good example of what I'd like to see Spotlight do, right?
Yes. So this idea of, imagine Spotlight, but it's for quickly activating a feature of the app you're using, or speeding up navigation via text commands. And there are, of course, spin-offs and different flavors of this feature. Like, for example, in apps like Obsidian or Craft, you have the same approach presented to you in two different ways. You either have slash commands, which I don't think Apple will do. I think they are inelegant. But you also have a command window where in Obsidian, you can press a hotkey and you can search for any command of the app. And it's the same deal in Craft, where you can mix and match commands and navigation, right, when you're using a keyboard. And I think Apple is considering something like this. And it wouldn't surprise. First of all, I will say that this will only continue in third-party apps, right? I think more and more apps, if keyboard input is continuing to be, one of the aspects that developers focus on, I think it's only natural to end up with this kind of feature where you're like, okay, but what about navigation from the keyboard? And what about triggering different features and commands from the keyboard? I think more third-party developers will launch features like this one. But I also think Apple will consider it, because it feels like a natural complement for apps like Notes or reminders, even Safari maybe. And you mentioned like Spotlight should do this. I kind of wonder if maybe this could, like, imagine if developers could make Spotlight extensions where you would still press Command Space, but now when you press Command Space in the app you're using, you would also get special commands or navigation features, so that you can keep using the same launcher UI, but developers can populate Spotlight when their app is in the foreground using a Spotlight extension. And so imagine like you're using, I don't know, let's say that you're using Marvis, right? On your iPad, and Marvis has a Spotlight extension. You press Command Space, as always, but now in addition to the usual Spotlight stuff, you also, if you type, I don't know, FA, fast forward comes up as a command, and that's a Marvis command powered by a Marvis extension. Yep. I think it would be interesting to see that kind of approach from Apple.
It really would be, and I think there's room for it to be incorporated into Siri too, because this is the kind of command-based interface that could work really well with voice and ultimately be part of an AR headset.
I mean, those commands, when you think about it, those commands should be powered by shortcut intents.
Yep. Yep.
And those would be like, it would be just a way to surface those commands more natively, more quickly in Spotlight than it currently is. So
Right.
instead of having to build a shortcut yourself, you would just surface those commands as Spotlight extensions within the launcher UI.
Right, because the whole idea is short-circuiting that process of either clicking around and drilling into different layers or tapping around with your finger. Instead, you go right to the functionality that you need and want.
Exactly. So that's, text-based command systems. I think definitely something worth keeping an eye on. I think we should continue talking about this idea of convergence between iPad and Mac apps. And I think Stage Manager, again, despite the fact that Apple is cutting it super close in terms of having a working version of Stage Manager on iPadOS, which is very much, as we are recording this, I think I should, for posterity, so that we can mark this moment in time, the very challenge that I'm having right now is that I've basically started being able to use Stage Manager a week ago. and I've gone and I have this hole in my summer from mid-July to the end of September / early October, where I was unable to use Stage Manager, not because I didn't like it. Like, it wasn't a matter of taste, it was a matter of the thing actually crashes on my iPad. Like, I was literally unable to use it, and now it's working again with a bunch of asterisks. For future us, when we will be listening back to this episode 3 years from now, remember this moment, how much I was struggling with deciding what to do with Stage Manager in mid-October. Anyway, I think there's something here in terms of, in the future, I think Mac and iPad apps what will continue to happen is they will continue to evolve in parallel. I think short term, that's what Apple wants. I'm not saying that Apple wants to put macOS on iPadOS or that the Mac and iPad will become the same computer, although on a long-term timescale, maybe. But short term, 2 years, 3 years from now, I think this idea of, let's make sure that iPadOS has a bunch of these macOS features. Let's make sure that iPadOS has the same multitasking system as macOS. Let's make sure that you can go, that you have something like universal control that lets you move from one platform to another. I think this idea of parallel tracks between these two platforms, definitely a trend that will only continue in the future.
I agree. I mean, I've been watching this really closely from the Mac perspective in my annual Mac OS reviews. And this is really, I feel like Stage Manager has the potential to be one of the last big bricks in this wall that puts it together and creates this bridge between the two platforms. We've already seen extensive design changes to make them more familiar, the two systems more familiar in that way. We've seen underlying developer technologies introduced to make it easier to make the apps across both systems. We've seen Apple's system apps, for the most part, get on the same schedule between iPadOS and macOS, which wasn't the case that long ago. And the one thing that we haven't had, though, is the ability to move from one to the other where your interaction with the apps on each system is largely the same. And to me, that's Stage Manager. Now, you've had a lot of problems, and I think that makes this a harder story to tell at this particular moment in time. Yeah. But I think they'll get there. And I think that the design, the idea and the goals are there. It's just a matter of whether the execution will be there in a way that will allow users to really adopt this and enjoy it.
Yeah. And so here's what I think, and I'm going to try my best to make this very complicated argument sound simple to follow.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's challenging for me to talk about it right now because there are the technical bugs, like the issues, like the actual things that have prevented me from using it, starting at some point in the summer, because it wasn't always like this with the first few betas of Stage Manager. I wonder what happened. mid-cycle to cause all those issues to arise at some point in the summer. Then there are the some of the underlying design decisions behind Stage Manager, right? There are some things that Apple decided for Stage Manager and how it should look, what it should work on, what it should be like on iPadOS, that I think some of them are right, some of them are misguided. Like, for example, the insistence on iPadOS on creating standalone workspaces all the time, as opposed to what you can do on macOS, where you have greater freedom to say, no, this window, I want to open it in the current workspace. And I think they're doing some things better on macOS than they are on iPadOS. But then there's also a third aspect that I think we should focus on right now, because this is part of the trends, right? The things happening in the future that we are discussing today. I think one of the things that Apple miscalculated with Stage Manager this year is the lack of a developer API. Now, this is a double-edged... is it a double-edged sword or knife, John? Is it
it's a
knife?
sword.
It's a sword, right? A double-edged knife. I mean, more like a dagger, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe?
No,
Yeah.
This is a full-blown sword, Federico.
This is full-blown sword? Okay, right. Gotcha. Okay, so it's both a pro and a con. The lack of a Stage Manager API means the Stage Manager works out of the box with everything on your iPad, right? Developers don't need to do anything to support Stage Manager. My friend Steve Troughton-Smith put it so eloquently in a text message to me recently. He said Stage Manager and multi-windowing is something that happens to iPad apps. Which it may sound silly, but think about it. It's something that is like a layer of abstraction above the app, and it just happens to you. As a developer, you have no idea if Stage Manager is active.
And none of those apps were ever developed with the idea that they would be in a separate window.
See, so exactly. So you're getting it. So great. Developers don't need to do anything with Stage Manager. It works out of the box. But there's also the con, meaning, well, the same sentence in a slightly different tone tells you developers can do anything about Stage Manager. And
Right.
you literally, there's no API, there's no hook, there's no endpoint for you to say, is Stage Manager active right now? Is my user using my app in multiple windows? Is there anything that I can do in terms of adjusting my UI or adjusting my layouts or adjusting how I listen to inputs, right? Is there, like, developers have none of that in Stage Manager at the moment on iPadOS. And I think this is a key aspect that we will need to keep an eye on for the future of iPadOS and this convergence between Mac and iPad for the next few years. I think Apple will revise this. I think Apple will go back and say, if we are betting on Stage Manager as the UI for working on an iPad with multiple windows, we need to give developers more tools, right, to understand whether or not Stage Manager is active, and to give them more ways, well, not more, to give them ways to optimize their interfaces and their app experiences for the Stage Manager environment. Because again, right now, Stage Manager is something that happens to an app. It's not
Right.
something that a developer can control. And I think that will change, and we should keep an eye on this.
All right, Federico, I'm really intrigued by this next topic that you added to our notes, which is adaptable UIs for the home. What are you thinking about here?
So I'm thinking that obviously Apple doesn't have a home strategy anymore, right? If you think about it.
Right.
They discontinued the original HomePod. iPads can no longer serve as HomeKit hubs as of iPadOS 16. And in general, I just feel like Apple's only offering at the moment is an Apple TV streaming box and the HomePod Mini. And I really feel like Apple has a shot at re-entering the home market in a big way with a new lineup of accessories. And I mean, I think we've seen there's a lot of movement on this front lately. especially because of the Matter initiative, which has been
Right.
the Matter spec, which promises greater interoperability between different platforms, much more reliable connections thanks to the connections over IP, basically over the internet. And we've seen a lot of movement on this front, from Google, from Amazon, from all these accessory makers that are already Matter certified. And I think it's a great time to be into this kind of stuff because in many ways it feels like the beginning of something new. But Apple is facing this great new beginning with essentially little to no hardware of their own, except the HomePod mini. So I think this will develop on two fronts. I think there'll be new hardware from Apple, right? Whether it's new HomePods, new docking stations, new hubs. I think Apple they should definitely make new hardware to accommodate for this new beginning for the smart home thanks to Matter. But I also feel like I keep thinking about this potential for Apple to do with the home what they did in the car with CarPlay. So CarPlay, if you think about it, is like the specialized view for the car that runs on iOS. It's like an extension on top of iOS that adapts the UI for the car's dashboard. And I keep thinking, what if Apple re-enters the home market with, I don't know, a HomePod that has a display, or maybe an iPad that you can place on a dock or on a hub, sort of like Google is doing and will be doing with the Google Pixel tablet and its specialized docking station, so that once you place that iPad on this dock, say in the kitchen or in the living room, the UI gets optimized for viewing at a distance, right? And having these giant and comfortable controls for things like timers and music and calendar or whatever it is you want to control in the home. And the same goes for a potential future HomePod with a display. So what I'm thinking is Apple has all the pieces are theoretically in place. They have SwiftUI, they have WidgetKit, they have Siri, and they have a system, again, inspired by CarPlay, where they can leverage iOS and iPadOS to sort of place a specialized UI on top of it. So I'm wondering if maybe that'll be a trend that we'll be discussing for the next couple of years. Again, whether it's about a display on a HomePod or an iPad that sort of switches its UI, or an iPhone, maybe you place an iPhone on one of these new home accessories and you get this special view for widgets and sort of a dashboard for controlling your home. I think, and even if it's just about a HomePod with a display, I think Apple will participate once again in this market. And when they will do that, there will be a user interface based on software to go along with it. So I think, for the next couple of years, so far we've only seen HomePods with basically like a glorified LED indicator on top. I think there'll be more than that. And I think there'll be a proper UI. And if so, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple goes after this kind of idea that it's like CarPlay, but for the home. So all your favorite apps, all your widgets, but running in a special configuration that makes sense for controlling these UIs in your living room, in the kitchen, very minimal control, large buttons, very, colorful and easy to use interfaces.
That's really interesting. I think there's another angle to this, Federico, which is something that I wrote about over the summer with the Home app, which I really like the new UI. I really like how it's evolved and how there's more that you can get onto a screen there. But the one thing that I found really disappointing was that automations have not really evolved at all. And I got to wonder, right? What's the automation role going to be in this new home UI? Are personal automations and home automations the seeds of what we'll see come out once once Matter is fully adopted within the Home app and Apple rolls out whatever they roll out with the rest of the home strategy?
Yeah, that's also a very good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Could be something really interesting there. It has that kind of basic building block type of creation, just like Shortcuts does, which I think could work really well on a screen that's designed to be a home hub type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this is we're right on the cusp of something. Just something is going to happen in this space, and Apple will be one of the key players here because it's just so weird the situation that we're in at the moment, where they have a home
It
and
is.
HomeKit and a HomePod Mini and nothing else, and I'm just like, is that it? It cannot be it. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what they do.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Cosmic. Cosmic is a dashboard for your creativity. Built for designers, researchers, and writers, Cosmic's infinite canvas on the iPad and Mac lets you bring together notes, your writing, images, websites, PDFs, and more on a single canvas called a universe. That way, you can stop switching between apps and focus on your creating. Everything in a Cosmic universe is a card, and cards from one canvas can be incorporated into another, making it the first Canvas app with the sort of transclusion found in note-taking apps like Roam Research and Obsidian. It's a powerful yet simple architecture that reduces friction so you can focus on your work. The flexibility of Cosmic's Canvas means you can take notes, browse the web, collect PDFs, images, and other resources, and write all in one place. That encourages spatial thinking, making new connections and links between materials, and reduces distractions all at once in a single easy-to-use UI. Cosmic is a completely native peer-to-peer solution that syncs your data between devices with no central server in the middle. Everything is encrypted end-to-end, too. You can publish Cosmic canvases and cards to the web for sharing with colleagues, and even more collaboration features are coming later this year. Cosmic is available on the web now, too, making it accessible in more places and to more users than ever before. Plus, their public launch is just around the corner. If you're looking for new ways to organize your thoughts, writing, and really just about anything else, sign up for Cosmic today. To learn more, go to cosmic.app. That's KOSMIK.app today. From ideation to production, Cosmic lets you think better and more freely to uncover insights and to have some fun, too. Our thanks to Cosmic for their support of the show.
Obviously, the next item in terms of trends we'll be discussing for the next 2-3 years, AR and mixed reality, right? Augmented reality and mixed reality. Headsets are coming, right? We're seeing this happening right now. Meta just announced the Meta Quest Pro headset. Apple is obviously going to enter this market very likely within the next few months. I think there's a serious shot at this happening within a 6-month time frame of this podcast recording.
Yeah.
That the Apple
Apple
headset is coming. And obviously, this is a huge topic, and I don't even know what to imagine here. But just all the things that we've seen happen with AR and ARKit on the iPhone, imagine that, but multiplied by so many levels of more native interaction, faster interaction, better performance on a headset, right? And like even in my daily usage, like lately, I cannot tell you how convenient it has been every once in a while to dip in and out of AR with my iPhone to place furniture in my empty apartment in the house that we just bought. Just being able to test and to place 3D virtual elements in a physical space, that's exactly what AR was built for. And so I can only begin to imagine all the potential applications for this. Again, it goes back to rich notifications and live activities popping up in front of your eyes. Authentication based on iris scanning, for example. Driving directions, walking directions. Placing objects in a physical space around you. Playing games in a physical space around you. And what about projecting UIs, right? What about, MKBHD actually just tweeted a demo of this today, and I've seen other people do this. What about adding virtual monitors to your computer? Like imagine you're wearing a headset and you're sitting in front of an iPad or you're sitting in front of a MacBook Pro, but suddenly when you're wearing the headset, you have 2-3 monitors around you as well, like virtual monitors where you can extend macOS or where you can extend iPadOS. Now, obviously, there's many questions here, right? Like, will those virtual monitors be, high definition enough to be a good substitute for a real 4K monitor on your desk? That's unclear right now, but I think it's very much the direction we're going with this. Like, And of course, the first versions of this headset will be clunky and the kind of object that you're very much obviously wearing on your face. Like, it will not be discreet, it'll not be subtle. But I think 3 years from now, I think it'll be pretty much the norm in terms of like, yeah, let me dip in and out of AR and place stuff around me, place interfaces around me so that I can get work done or be entertained or play games or just, see stuff around me that I wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Yeah, I think for the near term, these things are going to be very expensive and have very short battery life, just like the what Meta has introduced. But it is where we're headed, and I think you're absolutely right about that. I mean, and hopefully everybody will have legs too someday.
Legs,
I mean, just like Meta, right? Legs are a big thing this week.
I loved your weird tweet of SpongeBob.
I know. Oh, my SpongeBob, my SpongeBob.
You should link that in the show notes. Some people on Twitter were like, "John, what does this mean?" And you were like, "Legs."
I was tweeting Zuck. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, my best experience, I think, with AR was when I was out at WWDC and was able to use the walking directions where you just hold up your phone and it overlays the directions on the street or sidewalk that you're walking on, which was really nice. That's not in a lot of places yet, but of course it's in the Bay Area. And that was really nice. I also think that the developers who are taking advantage of app intents and creating atomic bits to all their apps are going to be the ones who are ready for this when it comes.
Yeah. And I want to close this out with a very much more niche topic, but it's classic app stories, automation and shortcuts. So what's going to happen in terms of automation? What's the trend going to be for automation over the next couple of years? I think a couple of things I want to point out here that I think we'll be discussing in episode 400 of App Stories. I think, first of all, there's going to be this great convergence, once again, of automation between macOS and iPadOS. If I were to bet on this, I think short term, a trend that we will see is the arrival of macOS actions for controlling multitasking on iPadOS. I think Stage Manager is the first step toward this unification of automation for power users in terms of controlling your windows on your computer and going beyond like dragging your windows around with the cursor or resizing them manually, going beyond that, using shortcuts as the glue to control those windows. In practical terms, I think within the next year, maybe even within the next 6 months, we'll see the resize windows and the find windows actions from shortcuts on the Mac arrive on iPadOS because of Stage Manager. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And I think that'll be a trend to keep an eye on. And related to that, I think another trend that Apple will, something that Apple will start doing and will start considering is, again, for power users, we're talking about power users here. That's why I said it was a niche topic. But I think we will be talking about user interface automation, controlling UIs. Things like, imagine Keyboard Maestro and those GUI scripting tools, like let me resize a window and click this, or let me open two windows side by side and trigger this menu using Better Touch tool. Like all these things that advanced users have been doing for a while with this combination of very complex utilities. Imagine that, but slimmed down and simplified to work with shortcuts with a native framework that lets you create these macros, basically, to control app interfaces from shortcuts.
That's an interesting idea, and I think it actually could work with something like Stage Manager, because Stage Manager is a little bit like Windows on Rails, because there's fewer options and fewer permutations you can have for how your screen setup is going to look, which actually makes automation a lot easier because you have a better idea of where things are going to be on a consistent basis. That is, if you're automating UI. So I could see that. Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think we'll also see a trend, which we've already seen a little bit of it this year, with shortcuts actions digging deeper into the heart of apps for doing things like switching settings, which we've seen Apple start to do, which I think is an encouraging direction for shortcuts. All right, Federico, that was a great conversation. We did say that we were going to talk about episode 200 too, but we're going to save that because we had a lot more predictions to talk about than we realized. So we'll be back to talk about that soon. And in the meantime, you can find the two of us over at macstories.net. Federico is at Viticci on Twitter and Instagram. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.